Welcome back, everybody, to Post Wrestling. John Pollock here with you, and joining us today, a man of many titles. This is not an easy introduction because he has so many placements out there, whether it be comic book artist, comic book author, radio host, Ontario independent wrestling promoter, almost retired pro wrestler. Anthony Kingdom James is with us on Post Wrestling. Kingdom, how are you today?
I'm good, John. Thanks for having me on the show again.
Well, there's a lot to discuss, and off the top, the excuse to have you on was that you are involved with this brand new release that ECW Press is going to be dropping on Tuesday. Austin 316, 316 Facts and Stories about Stone Cold Steve Austin by author Michael McAvenny. And can you tell us just a bit about the book and how you got involved with this?
Yeah, it is a fantastic little digest, I almost want to say, of exactly what the title says, facts and stories about Steve Austin, about Stone Cold Steve Austin. And it is, I'm holding a copy right now, and it is so well put together. Like, I mean, kudos to ECW Press for their design, because this is, I'm not sure what I expected the book to look like, but this thing is amazing. How I got involved is due to our mutual friend Greg Oliver. Greg, as most wrestling fans will know, is a wrestling journalist himself and has written multiple books on wrestling and hockey. And he has a relationship with ECW Press. And when they were putting this book together last year, they decided they wanted to get some illustrations for the book and asked Greg if he knew anybody that might be up for the task of doing a dozen illustrations of various points in Steve Austin's career. And Greg called me, and my immediate reaction was to go into imposter syndrome mode and think, there is no possible way I'm good enough to do that. Who can I pass this off to? And then, took a deep breath and said, no. I can do this. And did a sample image of Austin and Booker T and the supermarket brawl, and sent it in, and it got approved. And they had to besides themselves, they had to get approval from Michael McAvenny, the author, and they had to get approval from the WWE office, which apparently included Austin, Triple H, and some legal who's-y what's-it so that they have at the, at the Stamford office. So I was very pleased when it came back to me that, I had the gig. But I also had a set of rules that came back to me, which I was just delightful, including the biggest one, the most important one is I wasn't allowed to draw Vince McMahon.
Wow. That was awful.
Yeah.
That's a kind of tough restriction on a book about Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah, I had already done up, my sample image almost ended up being Austin and the bedpan incident. So, if I had done that instead of Austin and Booker, I might not have gotten the gig. But I think that, it's one of those things that you think your immediate reaction is, why the hell not? And then you think about, well, you're not supposed to mention him during your Hall of Fame speeches. There's kind of a precedent for it. So it ends up making sense. But yeah, it was kind of restrictive. It wasn't kind of restrictive. It was restrictive to be drawing images of Steve Austin's career and not be able to include the hospital attack or, the gun with the bang flag, or anything to do with Vince.
Is that what immediately you go to mind? Because when you think off the top of your head of infamous moments involving Steve Austin, it's, to me, like there's a lot that come to mind with all the different vehicles, the Zamboni, the bedpan you mentioned. I mean, there's a lot of images that come to mind. And then when you take it a step further, a lot of them are very much intertwined with Vince McMahon, obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, you start to think about what the big moments would be and what the big rivalries would be, and what long-term feud or long-term rivalry did Steve Austin have, did Stone Cold have in WWE that's bigger than he and Vince McMahon? Because McMahon was, even when he was feuding with The Rock or somebody else, McMahon was part of it. So, McMahon puppeteered in storyline. He puppeteered a lot of Austin's obstacles. So obviously you want to include something of that, but no, big letters in that email. Don't draw Vince.
You obviously are so, deep into the comic world. And I would imagine that when you're talking about these characters, which by extension, Steve Austin is this intellectual property, is that kind of typical that you would see, very specific instructions about just how Steve Austin is to be depicted in your framework of him, and what image he is to project in your work?
Well, I mean, for me, I've been doing independent comic work. It's all been stuff that I create. So I've never had, my editorial experience for comic books has always been suggestions on how to improve what's going on. Like, here's a loose thread in your story. Here's you could improve the logic here, or maybe this isn't necessary because you've already done this, or this will speed up or slow down your story, whatever. For this project, this is more like voiceover work, where I submit MP3 files, and the client gets back to me and says, "Hey, could you redo this more up tempo, or we've rewritten part of the script and we need to add a couple of lines." Because it's the first time, as far as I've never had anything in comic books where an editor has said, you have to change your creation to fit our rules, or because somebody else is doing something. The only thing close to it would be, for comic books, would be I did a collaboration with a few other artists with the publisher I was working with, where we took all our characters and did one crossover story. And that was a matter of having to make things fit for other people's characters as well. If I'm writing somebody else's character, I'm playing in their sandbox. I have to go by their rules, and vice versa. But no, this is the first time I had gotten somebody come right out and say, "Hey, you can't do that." So, a little different.
How many illustrations, all told, did you contribute here? Whether they made the book or not, like, what was the grand total, roughly?
12. There are 12 in the book. I think I had done 14. And there were a couple that as we talked about the rules, there was one that I didn't submit. And there's another one that I wasn't pleased with. So I said, hey, can you give me an extra day? Because I need to present better than this for you. So yeah, I think I ended up doing 14 in total, and there are 12 in the book. The assignment was always for 12.
As someone that was active on the independent scene at the peak of Austin's run and that entire late 90s boom period, what was kind of the trickle-down effect that you saw? Like, was that something that the independent scenes was benefiting as well as pro wrestling was at such a high point? Did that extend to the independents that you were a part of?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there was a different kind of excitement for pro wrestling at that point. And, I mean, in my experience, that's when crowds were the best for indie shows. I remember we were, in the late 90s in Pittsburgh, the little dirt indie fed that I was working for was pushing 500 people, every 2 to 3 weeks. And, yeah, I mean, in comparison, it felt kind of like you could just put out a shingle that said wrestling and people would come into the building. And obviously it's not that simple. But yeah, the late 90s were very, very good for independent wrestling in my experience.
It's always interesting with Austin being that, I mean, granted, the man had an incredible nest egg to fall back on, but to me, one of the, it's not the only guy, but one of the few that said, I'm done. And I cannot imagine the amount of money he has turned down in the last 18 years, but it has been that long since he last wrestled. And it's been, that's a rarity in pro wrestling. Like typically it's always looking at that next offer and this being a bit of a drug to have to fulfill, but he walked away and I'm sure turned down many, many offers to come back for that one last match.
Well, I think it's probably his neck surgeon who said you're done, and he was just smart enough to listen. But
that was my thinking too, Anthony. And then of some of the returns we have seen over the last year, I don't know. It's like there's been some advancement in neck injuries that have been able to turn back the hands of time.
Oh yeah, but you get hockey players who end up with 33 surgeries on their knees in the 70s that they don't get to come back just because the surgery is improved. But Austin, I mean, the thing with Steve Austin is he has a depth of charisma, and that charisma was something that has been something that he's been able to channel into other venues. He's done a slate of little movies, and he's done his podcast, and he's done TV shows. So there are things that Steve Austin had opened him, and he made himself a household name, which is so incredibly rare in professional wrestling. If you think about the small number of people that outside of professional wrestling fandom that people would name if you said name a wrestler, and they'd go to Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, The Rock, Steve Austin. Those are the names that even today a non-wrestling fan will know. And to be one of them means being able to translate into other opportunities open for you. And he's been brilliant at taking advantage of those other opportunities and really running with the ball. He can do more than just wrestle, and he's done it. And it's fantastic to see.
And also, I think he's been someone that's been very smart with his exposure on WWE that he doesn't overdo it. I think he's very strategic with when he'll do a big Raw appearance for one of those Raw reunions, but also to your point, like pivoting over that I'm sure there is a younger generation that is aware of Stone Cold Steve Austin, the wrestler, but their viewpoint through him now is either as a television host or as an interviewer. That is kind of their exposure to him now, is seeing him in that light.
Yeah, it's not that he's, used an eyedropper to portion out his appearances, but you're right. He's been very smart about how often he does that type of thing, and so as to not wear out his welcome with the fans.
So we'll continue to plug the book at the end here, but it is out on Tuesday. It's Austin 316 Facts and Stories about Stone Cold Steve Austin. But you and I were actually chatting last week, and one of the things I wanted to discuss with you when I had you on was of course, the ongoing pandemic. Everybody has been affected by this, but I wanted to get some of your insight just in terms of, first of all, rewinding a year to just before the shutdown. How would you categorize the health of the Ontario independent wrestling scene specific to the Greater Toronto area? Like how were things in your estimation before everything got shut down?
I thought things were pretty good. You had Smash and Superkick and Alpha One and Lucha Tio and of course the Wrestlers Union. I had restarted things, and various other small independent promotions running here and there, and things were going pretty damn well, I thought. And now, if you ask me to compare today to a year ago or a year and a half ago, I don't know if there's a comparison I could make. I don't think today I could tell you the health of the current scene. It's more like right now it's in suspended animation. Yeah. It's on ice, and we'll have to see what happens 6 months or a year from now to determine how well things are. But a year and a half ago, especially, you think back a year and a half ago when WWE brought SummerSlam to Toronto, and there were a slew of indie shows that went on August of 2019. That week, that 1 week in August was, Toronto was just inundated.
You've never seen something like that before in Toronto, like that scale of like a mini kind of WrestleMania weekend where it was much more than just WWE.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I can't remember who started that trend of instead of shying away from a WrestleMania site, congregating there and turning it into a festival. But, kudos to whatever promoter it was Ring of Honor? Or
I think you have to look at ROH, that first time that they ran of like WrestleMania 20 weekend, and it's kind of it just grew exponentially from there to what it is now, that it's just, unbelievable if you were to compare it to even a decade ago, what a WrestleMania week now entails.
Yeah, well, kudos to them for having the foresight, or just the straight up balls to say, no, we're heading straight into the storm to set up shop. Because I think it's fantastic what happens now with each WrestleMania, and just the absolute flood of wrestling that comes to whatever that site city, whatever that host city is. And we got a taste of that for SummerSlam 2019. I hope that this city gets a third WrestleMania at some point in the next few years, because I can only imagine how wild it would be for a WrestleMania.
Yeah, I think like that's just a totally different animal. Like you're not going to have the same level of travelers for a SummerSlam that you will a WrestleMania. That said, I don't know where we're even talking about, international WrestleManias at this point, but all things considered. But I mean, from your viewpoint, like how are you addressing things, or kind of looking at a 6 to 8 month window in regards to like union and promoting? Is it something that you're just sort of have not made a decision? Do you want to come back? Is it a foregone conclusion you will? Where's your mindset at?
It's not a foregone conclusion that I will, so much as it's wrestling and nobody ever gets out. I remember when I ran what I thought would be my last show back in 2014, having a conversation with RJ City, where he just looked at me with that RJ City grin and said, "So you really think you're never going to run again?" And I said, "Nope, this is it. This is the last waltz, man. Oh, you'll be back." And he was one of the first people that I called 5 years later when I decided that I was going to run again, to say, "Yeah, okay, you were right."
Which by final show ever standards, Anthony, 5 years, that's a significant amount of time in the wrestling
five
calendar.
years is forever in professional wrestling. I mean, 5 years, Terry Funk screams forever 15 times for you. So I would hate to say one way or the other that it's for sure, but it leans towards, there'll be more shows. It's just a matter of when. And I've talked to Lenny Lilac. He's my partner in the union now, and we talked about it. And we're thinking that if we have a show by the end of this year, we'll be lucky. And it's kind of sad because I have a venue booked. I have a venue booked for April 9th and 10th that I have to contact them and figure out how we're canceling or postponing again. And it's a venue that I booked 18 months in advance.
Wow.
Because April 9th is my birthday. It happens to be a Friday. It happens to be my 50th birthday. And I thought, oh man, I need to run something on my birthday that would be so cool. Well,
what could go wrong?
Well, 18 months out, there was no possible way anything could go wrong except me not booking the venue.
Long-term planning is very overrated.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So I mean, maybe by the end of the year, I think that comic book conventions will happen for me first. I'm almost certain that I'll be at a comic book convention before I get to run a wrestling show. But I'm pretty sure they'll both happen again, possibly by the end of the year.
Do you give it thought of whenever it is that you can run another show, of just how different it may have to be in terms of just what is the audience going to be expecting of a live event experience? And that goes beyond wrestling. It goes for any kind of in-person gatherings at that point. It's kind of going to be a blank canvas in terms of how we go about doing these things, especially indoor ones, and what certain precautions are going to have to be that will be instilled in people.
Yeah, I think a lot of people and a lot of event planners and a lot of wrestling show promoters probably gave this a lot of thought last late spring, early summer, because you remember, and I keep saying this to people, you remember today, the March 16th, tomorrow for me, is exactly a year of the pandemic. This was, when I got the call, hey, we're from my day job, hey, we're shut down.
And then it becomes real once there's that direct impact.
But remember that a year ago, we all thought we're going to shut down for 2 weeks and then the city of Toronto will reopen. We all thought this would be gone in a couple of weeks. We just stay at home. It clears out. We'll be back to normal. 2 weeks. 52 weeks later, we're still talking about 6 to 8 months. So there were a lot of people that I think late last spring or early in the summer were thinking, okay, this will be over soon and we'll get back to running shows. And how will we do it? Well, we got to put a few bucks into the kitty to have masks available at the door so that everybody has to wear a mask. And there'll be less people in the crowd and they'll be spread out a little more. And, you start thinking about alternatives like, at one point I was planning to run a show that was going to be, maybe a dozen or 20 people in the crowd, but how do we stream this to YouTube or to Twitch?
Right.
We were thinking about alternatives, and it's on a back burner in my head, but I know that when the actual possibility of running shows again comes up, that'll be a thing that I go back to exploring is a minimal crowd, but, online streaming, and possibly as part of a Patreon or a Kickstarter or GoFundMe kind of thing where people buy tickets and help fund it up front. So I think for some people it's going to drastically change the presentation of professional wrestling. Look at the shows, the indie shows that have happened in the States where, there's a lot of physical distancing and smaller crowds. People are already testing those waters, which, kind of scares me a little, just from a public safety, health and safety standpoint. But people are already testing the waters of how wrestling will have to change. And I don't think we're going to be any different up here. So,
do you hear a lot of feedback at all from any like wrestlers in the scene, just in terms of, it's an added frustration that, you've had a year that you haven't been working shows pretty much. It's not like in the US where there are indies that are functioning, where we have a border where to get back in here, like that's a 2-week quarantine period. It's already difficult enough for Canadian indie talent to cross the border under regular times. But I would imagine there's some that have had a lot of serious thought about, man, is this the point in my career that I have to look beyond wrestling? It's like independent wrestling. It is a labor of love. And this past year, I think had to have pushed a lot of people to make decisions about where their future lies in this industry.
Yeah, I would hope that more or most or at least more professional wrestlers, independent wrestlers, think about what they'll do beyond wrestling. I think there's kind of a graph that you can chart, where at the beginning of your career, you're thinking, can I get more wrestling and ditch the day job? And you're going to come to a plateau at some point where wrestling either becomes your full-time living or wrestling is enough of a supplement to your income that you're going to continue to do it, or you find some kind of day job pro wrestling balance that works for you and is sustainable. And then at some point, maybe on the other side of that plateau, you have to start thinking about less wrestling and more day job. And I always say in more than just wrestling circumstances, pack your parachute. Mm-hmm. If you're working for anybody, John, you are in the most enviable of positions. And I if I don't say it to you and to Way enough, how much I honestly admire you, I want you to know it.
Well,
because what you did was some suit came to you and said, "Hey, we're shutting this down." and your radio gig went away. And what did you guys do? You created Post Wrestling, and you set out on your own, and you created a footprint that is so solid. You are self-sustaining now. You are working for yourself, and you are making a living doing it. I don't think John Pollock or Wei Ting are, like working the night shift at the bakery to make ends meet. And I'm absolutely in awe of it. And if you aren't going to be working for yourself, then you are always, always, always in danger of somebody coming to you and saying, we're shutting this down, or your services are no longer required.
And I think where the media landscape has gone has very much like forced people into those positions where I think that you're going to see many more that kind of launch their own thing. And yes, maybe I will take work at a TSN or a Rogers, but I'm going to have my own sustainable position that I can't just be completely reliant on one place, because listen, these cuts that we just saw, a ton of them that have come down on the TSN side, like these will be reoccurring events in Canada, in the US. And I think people working in media have to be able to, figure out like having multiple things on all fronts, that you can't just be reliant on one thing.
Yeah. Comic book creator named Jimmy Palmiotti said years and years ago now that the way he saw wrestling, the way he saw comic books going, was that you would through Marvel or DC or one of the larger independents like Image, you would but most Marvel or DC, you would find the creators that you really liked, and you would become their fan, and that what would end up happening is that you would follow them to their own independent creations that they would fund through, you would buy personally through them, through their website, or they would fund through Kickstarter, so that that the comic book industry would become more socialized. The word I want to use, but it would spread out so that you weren't relying on Marvel and DC for most of what you read, but your loyalty would go to that individual creator and what they create, and you would be able to get your material straight from them. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of industries, like Bob McCowan. I'm going to take Bob McCowan as an example, who was at the Fan 590 here in Toronto, the sports station, for decades, and had a juggernaut.
Like he was the talk radio personality in the country.
Yes. And he had a primetime show. It was called Primetime Sports. They simulcasted it to TV. When he left, what does he do? He doesn't just, roll over. He creates a podcast. You can continue to follow him. You can get that material. You can get that product straight from the horse's mouth. So, I think that's what's happening with a lot of creators, a lot of commentators in comics, in sports, in entertainment. Now the technology exists to deliver your thoughts directly to an audience, and for that audience to deal with you with little to no filter of a corporate structure or editors or producers. You can just go to that person and connect with them for what they have to say and the stories they have to tell.
Was that something that you realized, fairly early, the fact that you've been someone that, I joke off the top, but you have so many irons in the fire that whether it's, the Handsome Genius show, your merchandising, comics, wrestling, it just seems like you have your blueprint out there and just get as much out there, but it all is associated with yourself, that you are involved in all these different projects that are not limiting you to just one resource, one income.
Yeah, my problem is there's too many irons in the fire, and I spin my wheels sometimes. You know, if I were concentrating on one thing, I'd be the king of the world. But I mean, there are projects even now that I've initiated that are moving too slowly because I get, I mentioned this earlier, imposter syndrome. You know, really, me, I'm the one doing this. Who do I think I am? And sometimes I can distract myself from the fear of failure on one project by working on something else. And I need to buckle down and concentrate on, you know, the do one thing at a time, do it very well and move on. An obscure MASH quote. But yeah, the ability for me, I think maybe it's kind of, stubbornness, and there are things I want to do and I don't want people to tell me I can't do them. So wanting to create comic books, independent comics, creator-owned comics absolutely appeals to me, because I don't have to deal with editors telling me that's not what that character would say, or here's 40 years worth of continuity for the character that we own that you're being deigned to work on. And with wrestling, I absolutely have ideas that I think will entertain a crowd. I want to do them. If I want to do them and not be restrained by anybody's wallet or anybody else's silly ideas, run my own shows, you know. But as we say, the technology has improved so that there's less of a barrier between creator and creation and potential audience. So a thing like Pro Wrestling Tees or Teespring or T-Fury, any of those places that, you know, kind of like t-shirt syndicators, I come up with an idea, I create the design, I can upload it, and they'll print it on demand. I don't have to have, you know, $500 up front for a small print run of shirts. I don't have to, there's so little barrier between me and my idea and making it available to people. And that's absolutely gorgeous. And it's, you know, it's worth, most of the time it's worth, cutting somebody in on a piece of the profits to be able to make my idea available. The one thing that I've said for a long time is, in the end, all we are is a collection of our own ideas. So long after we're gone, people will remember the things you've said. So you might as well say something cool. And that's what I hope the comic books and the wrestling and the t-shirts and all the bullshit that I've created, I hope that long after I'm gone, people will look back and say, fuck, that guy was kind of cool.
Well,
that's all I want.
I think that you are someone that just has such a great knowledge of so many different areas. And I think that you're such a valuable insight. Like if I was a 20-year-old in an independent wrestling locker room, I think you'd be the guy I would be drawn to just be picking his brain of navigating this very bizarre world, and someone that I think has seen the highs and lows of it, and being able to understand what the greater picture is of, it's not just a straight line of getting better as a wrestler inside the ring. It's once that match is over, how are you going to keep that image of yourself in all of these people's heads after a show. If they want to support you, find a shirt, find more, and kind of just being able to market yourself in that way. And I think we're seeing certainly that influence has permeated, that a lot of younger wrestlers are starting to understand that it goes much more than just a 10-minute match on a Saturday afternoon. It's how am I going to expose my personality when I'm not on television, but I have all these tools that you've outlined, that the barrier for entry is much less to just get a microphone and sell yourself, find an audience, even if it's starting with a couple people. That's a couple people that are taking that time out to find out about this person that they saw at a local show.
Yeah, it was a weird thing for me years and years and years ago to realize that, I am possibly somebody's Monday morning water cooler talk at work. That, hey, what'd you do on the weekend? I went to a wrestling show, and let me tell you about this guy I saw. And, if there's 20 people on a show, that's 20 different water cooler talks that are taking place at 20 or more different water coolers. But yeah, your performance lasts beyond the 8 to 10 minutes, the 20 minutes that you're in the ring. If you're good, you leave a lasting impression on people, which they will take away and they'll tell other people about. So, to be more than just that moment is, that's a gift. And if you play it right, if you like a flower, if you nurture it and give it water and sunshine, you can build more of those moments and more of those memories for people and a bigger audience, and really parlay that into something great for yourself.
Well, Tuesday is Austin 316 Day, and the book will be out. Austin 316, 316 Facts and Stories about Stone Cold Steve Austin. April 9th is Anthony Kingdom James Day, so be sure to circle that one around the calendar. But Kingdom, I want to, the floor is yours to let all of the listeners know some of the projects you have going on and where they can follow your work in addition to the book dropping on Tuesday.
Okay. All of my relevant social media is branded to My Name is Kingdom. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, and of course Patreon are all .com.tv, whatever, / My Name is Kingdom. So, also at Twitter, in my bio, you'll find a link tree, which has links to all of my stuff. But, follow me on that social media. And, as long as I always say to kids at comic conventions that, if you're aspiring to be an artist, as long as you are sincere and polite, you can ask people questions and they'll usually lend you a moment of their time. I'm happy to connect with fans online, especially through Twitter. As long as you're sincere and polite and not a complete jerk, I'll respond. I even use Google Translate to respond to people in other languages. But for me, the most important things right now are I'm doing my own podcast again. I did it daily last year. I'm doing it 3 days a week this year. The Handsome Genius Club radio show, which you can find at handsomegeniusclub.com. Mondays and Thursdays on the website and on iTunes, Spotify, Google, Stitcher. Fridays are exclusive to my Patreon, and I would love it if people joined my Patreon. It is as little as $2 a month. You get the exclusive Friday podcast. You get bonus panels for the comic strips I draw. I just posted one today. You get old episodes of the podcast. You get comic book stuff. I try to make it as absolutely value packed as possible for the people who are kind enough to lend me their support and help me pay for the stuff I'm producing. It's a delightful circle. And you can also find me on prowrestlingtees.com/Kingdom James or at teespring.com/stores/My Name is Kingdom. All kinds of t-shirt designs and other merch there. And, yada, yada, yada. I don't know if and for the love of God, go buy the Austin 316 book. I have them available on my website. If you go to handsomegeniusclub.com, there's a new shop at the top menu, and you can find the book there. Get yourself an autographed copy from your Uncle Kingdom.
There you go. And he won't have any restrictions on people just to send your books to. There won't be. It's free reign. You can request anything from Anthony Kingdom James. Maybe even a Vince McMahon impression.
Not anything.
Within reason.
I'm very shy.
So go check it out. Patreon.com/My Name is Kingdom. You can also follow him on Twitter. My Name is Kingdom. And that will take you everywhere. HandsomeGeniusClub.com. The man has lots of stuff going on. And of course, the book is out Tuesday. And Anthony, it's always great to catch up with you. I hope that we get to reconnect at some point in the coming months. And I wish you all the best with the book coming out and the show, everything that you've got going on. It's always great to pick your brain and chat about many, many different topics.
Yeah. Well, you've always been more than good to me, Mr. Pollock, and it is never forgotten. And I am glad that Post Wrestling has been surviving and thriving through all of this global pandemic nonsense. And I wish you many more years of success, independent of the men in suits telling you what you're allowed to do.
Well, it's always appreciated, and we will definitely do this again in the near future. Maybe when Union is ready for the revival, we will definitely reconnect. The delayed 50th birthday party. Maybe you can put your birthday on hold until you're ready to run your show. You're not officially 50 until your next show.
Well, I'm not going to put my birthday on hold, but I'm certainly putting the party on hold. The 50th birthday party will be whenever I'm allowed to make it happen. But, hey, listen, I got a boot that I turned in, a wrestling boot that somebody left behind at a show many years ago that I actually had mounted as a trophy. That tournament has to happen. So, you know what? There absolutely will be at least one more Union show, because otherwise I just made a trophy out of a wrestling boot for no damn reason. So you're going to get invited to at least one more Wrestlers Union show here in Toronto.
Maybe the most appropriate Canadian-themed independent show of all time. Union presents a boot.
Oh, yeah, it's the boot. It's the Battle of Ontario tournament. It's the boot.
Anthony, thank you so much for the time. This has been awesome.
Thanks, John.